It's time to take a new approach to finding true fulfillment in your career, health, and state of mind through insightful conversations with those who have found their professional and personal passions while achieving balance. Whether it's entrepreneurs, athletes, or healthcare professionals, we bring you real people, real growth right here on the Boost Podcast. Now, here's your host, Elena Lipson.
Hey Boost Squad, and welcome to episode 6. Today I am thrilled to announce my guest, Kym Martin. Kym, are you ready to join the Boost Squad?
I am, Elena.
Great, we're so thrilled to have you. So guys, Kym is a 4-time cancer survivor and the founder of 360 Degree Insights, which is her strategic healthcare consulting firm where she does national speaking and she advises on designing patient and consumer-centered solutions. In 2015, Kym was also named one of the 15 disruptive women to watch in healthcare. And I cannot wait for you guys to hear Kym's story. It is so amazing and touching, and I think you'll find it all really inspiring. So Kym, given that introduction, please fill any gaps in for me and tell us a little bit about your personal life.
Thank you for that great introduction, Elena. I think a good place to start is back when I was first diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma at age 17. It was in the early 80s, and it was at a period of my life that was extremely stressful. You know, the teen years are rough. I had some challenges with my family at the time, and what I did to cope was I made really poor choices. I ultimately developed an eating disorder. I was living on alcohol and caffeine, which helped me deal with the drama, but it got to the point where my body couldn't handle the assault. And the Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnosis was not a surprise to me. At the time, radiation therapy was the only course of treatment. So I underwent my 40 rounds and I had the surgery that was recommended. And at the time, I was a very compliant patient. I delegated all my decisions to my parents and my providers. I didn't understand cancer well enough to know the impact. And I also was just learning about my body. So it was, as years passed, I started to develop moles in the area where I was radiated. And moles are not a typical skin pattern on either side of my family. So about 9 years post-diagnosis, I went to my radiation oncologist and I told him that I have all these moles developing and I really think there's a link to the treatment. And his response to me was, there's no evidence to support that and I don't agree. So I said, well, I'm evidence. These moles are not typical. So I took it upon myself to go see a dermatologist. And the first mole that I ever had removed, which is about the diameter of a pencil head eraser, came back as an evolving melanoma. And the dermatologist, in no uncertain terms, said to me, if I don't go in and get a clear margin, this mole will kill you. So I was 26 years old, and I became highly engaged in my care at that point. I became very diligent about doing my own mole self-checks and seeing a dermatologist twice a year. At every visit, I had 3 to 5 moles removed. So you can do the math, and about 12 years later and 60 moles removed later, I found another mole that was the size of a pinhead. And I went to my then dermatologist and I said, this mole is new, it's dark, and I'm pretty sure it's aggressive. And his response to me was, I don't think it's anything to worry about. And my response back was, we're not having this conversation. So when he did take the mole and called me a week later to share that that mole was in fact melanoma. And with that story, I just wonder how many patients would have said, okay, you don't think it's anything to worry about, and would have went on with their business. I don't know where I'd be today if I had taken his advice. So at that point, I learned to own my care, that I wasn't going to let my doctors make my decisions for me. Fast forward to 2012, and I'm diagnosed with breast cancer. It was at that point my oncologist confirmed what I had suspected all along, that my radiation exposure from the early 80s was the cause of my 2 melanomas and my breast cancer. I started out my story by saying that I was going through a really challenging time when I was 17. And there's a large part of me that believes, had I gotten the emotional support I needed, had I had somebody to talk to, had maybe I had some, medicinal support to help me cope and get through that period, I don't believe I think there's a high likelihood I wouldn't have been diagnosed with the Hodgkin's lymphoma because I would have made better choices. And had I not been diagnosed with the Hodgkin's, I wouldn't have been diagnosed with the melanomas or the breast cancer either, because cancer does not run in my family on either side. I'm the only one out of my parents and their 14 siblings who've ever been diagnosed, all down the line.
Wow. I mean, that story brings like tears to my eyes. The first time I heard you tell it was in a huge conference center. There must have been hundreds of people in there. And I just feel like there was this energy in the room after you told it that I had not seen the rest of the day. I mean, just thinking about it, guys, she had Hodgkin's lymphoma at 17 and 40 rounds of radiation that then led to these other melanomas that a lot of us probably like wouldn't even go get checked now. But Kym just had this gut instinct and knew that these weren't right. And she didn't listen to what the doctor said, even though most people just totally trust the doctors, especially back at the time when she was going through this. I think doctors traditionally have always been very trusted by patients. It's more of a recent thing that people are questioning them as, you know, WebMD has taken hold and people go online and look for information. But I mean, your story just amazes me. And can you talk a little bit more about how taking control of your own experience has really inspired you to think about how you want to bring this into your career and help better design for patient and consumer-centric solutions in healthcare?
Sure. So I've always wanted to turn my experience into something meaningful, to be able to pay it forward. You know, I'm a product of someone who's had cancer in my teens, my 20s, my 30s, and my 40s. I'm grateful every day that I have this story to tell, and the insights and the lessons that I've learned over the years about how extremely important it is, especially after a first cancer diagnosis, to never take your eye off the ball. And I know it's scary, and I know I too wanted to put my initial experience behind me. But had I not been as diligent and not been the one to take ownership of my care, you know, my outcome could have been very different, right? And I translate those qualities into business, keeping my eye on the ball of where can I deliver the greatest value from this experience. You know, healthcare is a massive industry, as you know, and I wanted to really find my niche to be able to help industry leaders and patients and families understand the journey of the cancer experience and how it's lifelong. We do a tremendous job in healthcare treating patients when they're first diagnosed and giving tremendous support to the patients and families. And then we get to the point where treatment ends and the support is no longer overnight. It's gone. And patients and families need to move from delegating their care to then overnight owning their care. And there's so many opportunities within that gap, that enormous gap, to help patients, families, and providers all stay ahead of the curve. And in business, it's the same with your niche, is making sure you're staying ahead of the curve and really trying to identify where you can make the greatest contribution based on your personal experiences and lessons. For me, it is helping companies design and develop patient and consumer-centered products. You know, I do a tremendous amount to manage my care even today, and I'm considered cancer-free. And I do that because I learned in my 30s the importance of my lifestyle changes, and diet, nutrition, and all that we talk about really does make the world of difference. And, you know, as an example, when I was diagnosed with the breast cancer in 2012, it was recommended that I do chemotherapy. And I chose to decline traditional treatment and follow an herbal and nutritional program, and have been doing so for 4 years. So that experience enabled me to really personalize my care. And my oncologist didn't agree with my decision, but he didn't think it was unreasonable because, again, I caught all my diagnoses early because I kept my eye on the ball. So when I look at all that I've had to learn to manage my care over the last 30 plus years, there's tremendous insight for informing products and solutions that healthcare is trying to create for people dealing with either cancer or chronic illness or just patient engagement. So that information isn't being really captured and can't be necessarily captured as well through surveys and questionnaires and focus groups and the traditional methods. So what I've done is branded myself as a patient expert, patient consultant, and I work directly with industry to just provide the insights and the depth of wisdom, if you will, that I've acquired over the years in understanding not just how to care for my health, but which caring for my health translates into helping millions of other patients care for their health, but in also understanding the psyche of the patient engagement process, because patients become engaged at different levels and different stages. Like I said, with my journey, I delegated my care with my Hodgkin's. I engaged in my care with my first melanoma. I owned my care with my second melanoma, and I personalized my care with my breast cancer. So I think we need to take a broader view of what patient engagement really means and what it looks like. And I try to help industry understand, at least try to have a better insight that it really matters where the patient is along that spectrum, because the conversations that take place with the patients and families differ. Right?
Yeah.
So there's just a very comprehensive opportunity for someone like myself. And there are many, many experts like me who have comprehensive, complex health issues that they have learned to successfully manage and now can, through their prior professional experience in business or technology or what have you, deliver value back to the healthcare system as a strategic consultant, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Kym, you're such a remarkable patient that I can't say I've ever spoken to anyone else that has been able to own and personalize their care the way that you have. And I think that the healthcare industry is really lucky to have someone like you that's looking to provide that perspective and inform them of how they can build solutions and offer care that is going to better treat patients and involve them more in the process and in taking better care of themselves after whatever acute or chronic issue is managed or cured. And so, given what you know from your own journey and what you're doing in your business now, what are the 3 things that we really need to know about designing solutions for patients and consumers that are centered around their needs and also engaging patients as experts in their own care?
So I've had the pleasure of working with some technology companies in doing usability testing and working alongside their design and development teams during the early stage of the product development cycle. Not bringing someone like me in at the end, but early on, to really ensure that the product meets the needs of someone like myself from end to end. And one example was I had the opportunity to consult with a company called Glimpse, and they were creating a mobile app that was really designed for patient portability. It was going to give me on my phone the essence of all the information I needed from my care providers in one place. So my data could follow me rather than me having to worry about my data moving through the system. And it was brilliant because when we think about it, I and all of us as patients are the only stakeholder in healthcare that moves through the system. So the data should move with us. So I got the opportunity to work with their team, and just by using the product to meet my own personal needs, it really helped them see greater depth of opportunity to develop value that wasn't being captured in other solutions. The end result was great. Glimpse got acquired by Apple.
Wow.
What better outcome for a startup than that?
Yeah, that's the dream.
I'm not here to say I take large credit, but I do think Glimpse did something strategic and brilliant in bringing people like myself, and I think they only used 3 to 4 experts. I know I brought a colleague of mine onto the project who had chronic pain as her condition. And all we did was use the solution, give feedback, continue to test it. The design team made the changes as we went along, and the product became much stronger because of the real world insights that were captured during the process. I think more companies have an opportunity to do the same, which is capture these vital insights and deliver greater strategic value to their end users.
Absolutely. And can you talk to us a little bit about how you went from, experiencing your journey as going from being told how to take care of yourself to owning and personalizing your care to then saying, I want to take this in the direction of creating a business around this, and talk a little bit about how you've grown your business in this area and what that looks like.
So my professional background early on in my career was in business development. I used to sell technology solutions in the manufacturing industry, the technology industry, the financial services industry, and I did have an opportunity to do some work in healthcare as well. And I've always been a strategic thinker. And with my personal journey, it's interesting. I'm married to a man who works in health IT. His name is Ross Martin. He's known by many and is a creative genius behind some very fun health IT music videos.
I can vouch for that.
And when Ross and I met, I was still selling technology solutions in the financial services industry. And when we had our son back in 2000, I took time off to stay home and raise him. And while I was home, I kept asking myself, what am I going to do next, right? So Ross would tell me, Kym, you got to get out and tell your story. And at the time, I was a Hodgkin's and melanoma survivor. And I told him, that's not interesting. Nobody's going to really connect with that story. And I wasn't ready. So when I was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2012, that's when it hit me that was now compelling enough. I just had to figure out from my journey what the business value of my story is, because I knew well enough healthcare didn't need just another story. So I had the amazing privilege. It's all kind of took off on its own. I finished up with my surgeries from the breast cancer in March of 2013. And as I said, I didn't do chemo, so I was ready to kick off a career. And I had my first speaking engagement in June of 2013. And it just started to get traction. It all sort of took on a life of its own as I was trying to figure out the healthcare industry. I was trying to understand the different roles and where my story really had impact or made the best sense to share. And what I learned in the first 3 years of my work doing speaking and consulting in healthcare was I participated in events that now I look back and go, yeah, that probably wasn't where I needed to be at the time. But I learned a lot. So I've grown in understanding the key elements of my story that make the greatest difference for industry. And I've taken the time to figure out my brand, to really work on my personal brand. And in doing so, I now can bring back into the mix my business development skills and my ability to connect with industry leaders across healthcare. I'm comfortable speaking with executives at all levels. And I'm really grateful for that experience that I gained early on in my career, because it's helping me now really align with strong opportunities to make a difference.
Yeah, and I think basically what everything you're saying is going towards is that this was really a process for you. This was not like overnight you were just like, all right, I'm going to start speaking at these events and doing these things, nor did you necessarily know you were going to end up here. So listeners, I used to work with Kym's husband years ago before Kym was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I remember him telling us when she was diagnosed with breast cancer and she hadn't yet gone out on the speaking circuit. And then a few years later, I happened to just be at a conference and saw she was on the agenda and I heard her speak for the first time. And it was just amazing. And still, she hadn't even launched this whole path to where she is today. And I think it's so interesting how you've really taken time to figure out where your story fits into your business and how you want to build your business around these experiences that you've had. And it's a great example of how, you can test out different things. And it's okay that you spoke at things where now you feel like, oh, parts of your story resonated more than others, and you just fine tune it over time. And you don't sit there and beat yourself up because it wasn't exactly how it would be today. And I'm also sure no one even noticed that maybe it wasn't exactly how you think it should have been. And the point is that those speaking engagements helped you get additional engagements and helped you on your journey along to figure out, how to build your brand more precisely and carve out that niche for yourself. And so Boost Squad, this is a real lesson that, you don't have to know exactly where you're going. I think the point is to be intentional to some degree, but then just get out there and start, and you'll learn over time what works and what doesn't, and you'll continue to refine your value proposition over time. And Kym has done that. And I know that she doesn't view it as like an end point in time. It's just a constant journey, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like I'm at a point today where the culmination of my life is, really coming into more clarity. And I turned 50 in May, and I think that's part of it too. I feel like I'm now really stepping into who I am too.
That's great.
So, one of the mantras that I live by is say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. And in the beginning, I said yes to everything in healthcare because I needed to learn. I needed to have a broader understanding of the dialogue that was going on, the priorities within healthcare, the various stakeholder interests. I'd always lived on the outside of the system, right? Now I was trying to learn the internals of the system. And as I gained that information, I got to a point where recently I did take a step back and reevaluated and took time to intentionally figure out what my niche was going to be. What stake was I going to put in the ground? And since I've done that, it's been wonderful because I have no reservation about saying no to the good so I can say yes to the great because I have clarity on where I know I want to play. And that's made a world of difference, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, Boost Squad, I really want to make sure you're taking away what she's saying here. Say no to the good so you can say yes to the great. And that is such good advice to help you build boundaries and figure out intentionally where you want to go. And I think most people starting off did what Kym did. I know I did too in my business. Every opportunity that came my way in the beginning, I took it. And quickly I realized that I was spending time on things where I wasn't adding a lot of value, and then I wasn't able to take on other opportunities that would have been perfect. And I think that's a natural progression that people go through, but over time you get better at it and you start to know it works. So I just want to make sure everyone pick that nugget up from Kym. One of the last things I want to hear from you, Kym, is how do you balance your personal life and your social life and just taking care of yourself with everything that you're doing to grow your business?
Oh my goodness. Isn't that the trick for all of us?
It sure is.
So I live healthcare 24/7 right now because I still do a lot to manage my care, fitness, nutrition wise, and my supplement protocol it's pretty complex. And I work in healthcare. So what I did to break up my focus and kind of balance out with some creative opportunities is I started training as a voiceover artist. So I'm really excited about that because I've always wanted to try my hand at it, right? And I really see an opportunity to use that in my healthcare work too, to use that skill because there's so much media and messaging in healthcare that's patient-centered, right? But doesn't always necessarily sound authentic. And as a patient, I know a lot of it doesn't connect with me. So I'm hoping that there'll be an opportunity to bring some of my creative side to the work I do as well to balance it out. But I'm also a very spiritual person. So that really is my center and keeps me grounded. I never forget that, my outcome could have been very different. And I use my experience and my journey as really a means for greater good. I can't imagine putting my story on a shelf because I don't think that's what it was ever intended for. And my story is not about me. Let me be very clear. My story has nothing to do with me. It's a universal story. It has impact for all of us. So once I recognized that was also very grounding because it allows me to bring more depth to the work that I do because I got out of the way. So that's probably one of the most balancing tips that I have is I just really try to stay spiritually grounded.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, Boost Squad, it's interesting because she named things from diet, exercise, nutrition, to being a voiceover artist, to being spiritual. You can see that it's not just one thing that helps someone feel balanced. A lot of times there's a lot of different things. And even something as unique as doing this voiceover work for fun is something that really gives her that balance. And I think a lot of us think when we think of balance, we think we have to eat well, we have to sleep, we have to exercise, but also you could just go find another creative outlet and that could provide that balance that you need too. So I like that, Kym. And to close things out here, I just want to get from you a parting piece of guidance that you can give the Boost Squad, as well as the best way to connect with you.
So a parting piece of guidance. Well, if I can use another quote, and I don't recall the sources of either of the quotes that I shared tonight. This one is, nothing can change if it is allowed to remain the same. And for me, what that meant is we're all in a constant state of change. The world is in a constant state of change. And I think so many of us are looking outward and we see and recognize the change. But for me, what I really try to focus on is looking inward and making sure that I'm changing and growing and learning from the experiences that I have. Because becoming stagnant is easy, but it's also not an ideal. So for me, I think keeping that kind of top of mind helps me remember that I don't want to get complacent.
That is such a good point. I mean, I think that's when people who are successful sometimes end up plateauing, is because they just get comfortable and they don't continue to challenge themselves. They don't reflect and they don't self-examine, where they are and where they need to go and continue to change and evolve to get to the next place. So that is such a great point. Kym, so it has been so awesome having you here today. Please let the Boost Squad know how they can get a hold of you and connect with you.
The best way to get in touch with me is through email. And my email is Kym, which is KYM, at 360degreeinsights.com. And I also have a profile on LinkedIn under Kym Martin. And I would love to connect with your listeners. Happy to continue to provide insights where I can. And I wish all of your listeners the absolute best on their respective journeys as well, because we all, as you and I both know very well, we all have gifts to share.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Kym. And Boost Squad, I hope today's episode inspires you to think more about how you can find your passion and live your best life. For more information, head on over to our website and check out our show notes from this episode and catch the Boost bonus. Kym, I want to thank you again for sharing your journey with the Boost Squad today. And remember, guys, anything is possible.
Now that you've completed this episode, the next step is to join the Boost Squad for strategic insights, tips, and tricks, as well as exclusive resources designed specifically to accelerate your personal and professional growth. All this and more is waiting for you at theboostpodcast.com.